We now turn our focus to a topic of critical importance, not only for Switzerland, of course, but for the entire international community, the reconstruction of Ukraine. It is my pleasure to introduce the next plenary, Rebuilding Ukraine, Private Sector Initiatives for a Resilient Ukraine. And this plenary is led by Mr. Sebastian Ramspeck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chada, for your very kind introduction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon. It is a great honor to welcome you here all today and to be your host for the next 70 minutes. We are talking about Ukraine and about Switzerland's IC engagement there. 3 years ago, in 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, spoke of a Zeitenwende, a turning point in European history. We had once more the impression that there is an East-West confrontation, like after the Second World War, with the West standing with Ukraine. And in 2025, at this very moment, one might get the impression that there is another Zeitenwende with a historic US, American, and Russian rapprochement. However, when it comes to Ukraine, there might be some hope too. We know that today, the presidents of the United States and of Ukraine in Washington will sign a so-called reconstruction, like a deal that is including a so-called reconstruction investment fund that might be also benefiting Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Swiss government, as we already heard, considers supporting Ukraine and its reconstruction of fundamental importance. Challenges of reconstruction in Ukraine go, of course, well beyond the bounds of classic international cooperation, and the private sector is considered to have an important role to play. Accordingly, the Swiss government intends to, we have heard it, allocate 500 million Swiss francs for the period 2025-28. This will be the topic of our next 70 minutes, Rebuilding Ukraine, Private Sector Initiatives for a Resilient Ukraine. First, we have a video that we will watch. We will have a keynote speech and then the panel discussion. And I would say, let's watch the video first.
The Swiss federal government attaches strategic importance to supporting and rebuilding Ukraine. Long-term investments in the reconstruction of Ukraine are planned. In a first phase, the Federal Council has approved the country programme Ukraine 2025-2028, a strategic framework for the support and reconstruction of Ukraine, with 3 focus areas: protection of the civilian population and peace, economic recovery, and public services. Besides proven instruments of international cooperation, one priority of the programme is to involve the Swiss private sector in order to use expertise and innovations for reconstruction and to mobilise private investment. But Switzerland was already present in Ukraine before the war began. The two countries have shared a long-standing partnership. Since the 1990s, Switzerland's international cooperation has been committed to sustainably improve the lives of the Ukrainian people. Switzerland has supported decentralization and digitalization in Ukraine. A digital ecosystem has significantly improved public services by making electronic documents and online services. A national e-democracy platform has also been created. It is already used by 500 municipalities. Furthermore, a digital education platform offers 90 programs for children, teachers, and people with disabilities. Swiss stakeholders and leading manufacturers of sanitary products have also set up a nationally recognized training program for plumbing specialists. The project now supports 29 local vocational schools in Ukraine, offering more than just plumbing. It also provides courses for professions like facade insulation, welding, tiling, and concrete construction or electrical work. Switzerland also supports several Ukrainian cities in developing and investing in sustainable and climate-friendly transport solutions. more than 200 decommissioned trams from Zurich and Bern have found their way to Vinnytsia and Lviv during the last 2 decades. After 2014, and then following Russia's military aggression against Ukraine on 24th of February 2022, Switzerland has increased its aids with reconstruction as a priority. Between 2015 and 2022, around 3.9 million people on both sides of the contact line in the Donetsk region have gained access to clean drinking water thanks to water treatment chemicals sent by Switzerland. Since 2022, Switzerland has also stepped up its engagement in the water sector and helped municipalities to rehabilitate destroyed drinking water and wastewater systems. The war in Ukraine is taking a heavy toll on the people. That's why the mental health program is designed to mitigate the devastating impacts of the war. The aim is to improve care directly in the communities, keeping support close to those who need it most. Another project offers quick support for the rehabilitation of the wounded and those dealing with war traumas. In 2023, Switzerland also helped repair around 270 kilometers of railway lines, expanding connections to Poland and the port of Odessa. This allows for more Ukrainian grain to be exported and more aid flow in from Europe. Ukraine's centralized heating network is outdated. In Jytomyr, Switzerland has helped modernize the local district heating network. Now, well-insulated pipes carry heat underground to buildings, where it can be individually regulated. This benefits around 18,000 people, who no longer have to suffer from the cold during the long, harsh winters. Furthermore, the Bern University of Applied Sciences has offered since 2023 the CAS course, Rebuilding Ukraine. When the students return to Ukraine, they will be able to apply their knowledge to real reconstruction projects. Lasting peace will not be possible in Ukraine without justice. That's why Switzerland supports efforts to prosecute crimes under international law and implement measures to supplement criminal accountability. For example, Switzerland strengthens Ukrainian NGOs, the OSCE, and the UN in documenting violations of international humanitarian law and human rights. Switzerland also supports the Ukrainian authorities locate and identify missing persons. Not knowing what has happened to a loved one is a heavy burden for the family and hampers efforts to promote peace and social cohesion. Switzerland will continue to stand in solidarity with the Ukrainians and work towards just and lasting peace.
As a child of the city of Zurich, I'm of course very happy to see these Zurich trams now in good use in Vinnytsia. And with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Ambassador Jacques Gerber. Please come here. He is the Federal Council delegate for Ukraine and overseeing the activities of both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Economic Affairs. And he is brand new in this function since 1st of January. And Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Monsieur le Conseiller fédéral, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you today to this second plenary session on Rebuilding Ukraine Private Sector Initiatives for Resilience, Ukraine. As you've already heard, I'm speaking today as a new Federal Council delegate for Ukraine, a role I have taken on since the beginning of the year, fully aware of the huge challenges and also responsibility it entails. The Russian war against Ukraine is a tragic chapter in recent history. For more than 3 years, Ukraine has been suffering the devastating consequences of the full-scale war. I would like to express my deepest sympathy with the Ukrainian people who continue to face enormous hardship. In this presentation, I will explain how Switzerland supports Ukraine and those affected by the war. Switzerland has a long-standing partnership with Ukraine dating back, you heard it, from the reforms effort in the 1990s. The long history allowed us to draw a strong networks and in deep knowledge of the local context. Our direct presence in various regions gave us credibility and a clear understanding of the challenges on the ground. In view of the enormous needs, the Federal Council has decided to increase its support for Ukraine in the long term. Over the next 12 years, until 2036, Switzerland plans to allocate 5 billion Swiss francs to Ukraine. This includes, of course, the 1.5 billion that you already heard for the period 25-28. 2 weeks ago, our Federal Council officially adopted the Ukrainian country program for this period. The aim of this program is to support Ukraine as a democratic and independent country by supporting reconstruction, reforms, and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to present to you the main feature of the new country program. It follows a clear strategy. The program consists of short-term, medium-term, but also long-term support to first help Ukraine strengthen its resilience, second, to support Ukraine in implementing reforms, and third, to contribute to Ukraine's reconstruction. To give you an example, infrastructure reconstruction in the energy sectors is an important part of this program. Switzerland first helped repair damaged energy networks to increase resilience. Second, Switzerland also supports reform in energy pricing. In addition, third, Switzerland funds the modernization of existing infrastructure. But you know that the needs are so important that we have to focus in our program on specific thematics. There are three. First, economic recovery. Switzerland supports small and medium enterprise and their access to global market. Switzerland also strengthens local skills and improves education for business needs. Second, public services. Switzerland continues to support the provision of public services in the field of education, health, public transport, energy, and also water supply. And finally, protection of civilians. The civilians population in Ukraine continues to be exposed to unbearable risks. In its peace building and humanitarian intervention, Switzerland concentrates on emergency relief and protecting people affected by the war. Humanitarian mean clearance is also a priority in this area. As we saw in the previous video, Switzerland uses a broad range of tools to support Ukraine. This includes promoting peace and justice, such as diplomatic mediation or offering good offices, providing humanitarian aid to meet urgent needs, and also supporting long-term development and cooperation projects. However, today's panel focuses on a new and crucial element of our approach, the involvement of the private sectors in Ukraine's reconstruction. This is really new for Switzerland. The reconstruction of Ukraine will require massive resources. Governments and international organizations cannot meet these needs alone. The private sector must play a key role in rebuilding Ukraine. For this reason, the Federal Council decided to allocate 500 million Swiss francs for measures to stronger include the Swiss private sectors in Ukraine reconstruction. Switzerland has created specific measures for that purpose. There are 6. The first measure is financing of project preparation studies for selected infrastructure sectors. Preliminary project studies will be financed with the goal of incorporating Swiss expertise into Ukraine infrastructure projects through feasibility studies. Second measure, it is the project financing in specific sectors, includes financial assistance for Ukraine to purchase products and services offered by Swiss company. The third measure is the extension of the JIP mandate. It is intended to enable Ukraine to use more Swiss goods and services. At the same time, it should grant the export industry better access to reconstruction projects run by Switzerland or the country, and also multilateral financing institutions. The next measure, Economic Forum, aims to strengthen collaboration between Swiss and Ukrainian stakeholders. Existing bilateral bodies between Switzerland and Ukraine should also be utilized to deepen economic ties between the two countries. Through the fifth measures, Swiss export risk insurance will expand its coverage of export transactions to Ukraine. This will promote private commercial projects in Ukraine and effectively support reconstruction in the country. With the last measures, the federal government, in collaboration with international partners, will assume some of the risks, therefore enabling the private sector to invest in Ukraine. Before handing over, I would like to showcase a successful pilot project of working with the Swiss private sector in Ukraine. In the framework of a public-private partnership, a Swiss company is contributing to the restoration of damaged residential building in Kharkiv, a city you know which has been heavily affected by the war. Around 12,000 windows in public buildings are being replaced. In this context, the company can preserve almost 100 jobs and contributes to vocational education and training for around 150 young professionals. This project is also supporting winterization efforts in Kharkiv and intends to strengthen the local economy. As you can see, this project answered to a real needs and answered in the concrete life of the people on the daily basis. To expand these efforts, Switzerland has launched a call for proposals. This call ensures a transparent and competitive selection of projects. The call is actually open to Swiss companies with a legal entity in Ukraine. Projects must align with Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction needs. It is very important for Switzerland and the Federal Council to have this point and criteria that all the project has to answer a real needs in Ukraine. We are confident that Switzerland can make an important contribution to the process of reconstruction in Ukraine by including the expertise of the Swiss private sectors. As you can realize through the videos, Switzerland is strongly committed to supporting Ukraine's reconstruction. I look really forward to hearing the panelists' ideas on how we can support Ukraine's journey towards a peaceful and prospective future. Thank you for your attention. Good afternoon.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your insights and good luck in your new function. 12,000 windows, that's an impressive figure, and it opens in a way the window for our panel discussion. And I would now like the three panelists coming to the stage. It's free seating, and when you are coming to the stage, please, I would just announce that there is the possibility, of course, also for the audience later on to ask questions. And I hope, yes, you see the QR code. So with your mobile device, you can register here, and through a tool called Slido. You are able to ask questions to the panelists. Will be towards the end of the panel discussion. Please ask one question, short question, so we can take as much as possible. And please also state who you are. And now, please, I will start to introduce you, but I thought that you'd already take a seat, because otherwise it's always like, no problem. So, first of all, I would like to welcome Ms. Hélène Budliger-Artiega, the State Secretary for Economic Affairs of Switzerland. Thank you very much for being on the panel.
Thank you.
Second person on the panel will be Stefan Bruppacher, the director of SwissMem, which is one of the leading associations, the largest industry association of Switzerland. And the third person on the panel, Dmytro Sidenko, the president of the Swiss-Ukrainian Business Association. Thank you very much for being here. It's a real pleasure. And so before we talk about the real topic of private sector involvement, I think on a day like this, I cannot spare you of some very general questions. I mean, today, Mr. Trump and Mr. Zelensky, the presidents of Ukraine and US, are probably signing a deal, including this reconstruction investment fund. And the first question goes to you, coming from Ukraine. Is it a good day or is it a bad day for Ukraine?
First, let's see if it will be signed, then what will be signed, okay? And then I believe President Zelensky can say, is it good or bad for Ukraine? Because he is the president of Ukraine and the voice of Ukrainians.
Very diplomatic answer.
Of course. Because
but your feeling, how are things going?
My feeling is everything which can help Ukrainians stop war will help. If this agreement is very useful for us, if this agreement will help our people to die every day from the Russian shells and bombs, and our best guys on the front line come back home, this is good for Ukraine.
Mr. Bruppacher, what is your view on today's meeting, but also more generally about the current situation of Ukraine and this war and geopolitics?
Well, perhaps up to a certain extent, it's a day like every day since the intronization, one could call, of the new US government. It's a day in which we wake up and through X we see what happened. And it's a wake-up call for us in Europe, but also for us in Switzerland, that we have to wake up to become meaningful again, because currently geopolitics are decided way beyond ourselves. And that is, as a Swiss and as someone who is living in Europe, as someone who is concerned about what happens in Ukraine, this is deeply concerning me.
State Secretary, in recent weeks, geopolitics has been in turmoil, and almost every day you have the impression there is a new development when it comes to Ukraine. Now, the Swiss government is not known for overreacting to foreign changes in foreign policy all around the world. However, talking about Switzerland and Ukraine, is there anything Switzerland might have to adapt, seeing the new geopolitical setting?
No, I think it's incredibly important that we stand firmly with Ukraine. But I would have to say, for me, it's a day of hope. Only history will tell, though, however. But I think what Switzerland stands for is dialogue. Under your leadership, Federal Councillor Parmela, you hosted, I'm so used to Federal Councillor Parmelide's program, Federal Councillor Gassis hosted one first important step, the Lugano Reconstruction Conference, and we believe in dialogue. I think that's Swiss DNA, and if the two gentlemen are actually talking to each other, that would make it a day of hope, but only history will tell.
Mr. Zdenko, there is a new estimate that Ukraine will need $524 billion for reconstruction. That's a new study published by international institutions, also the government of Ukraine. What are the most urgent needs?
I believe this is energy sector, of course, because strategically, what is Russia trying to do is to create or to terror our people, to break their will. And the best way, of course, to destroy the electrical system and heating treatment, because modern world, if we turn out power for 24 hours here in Switzerland, what will happen with society? And this is how our enemy trying to break us. And they was pretty successful to targeting the energy sector, and I believe energy sector right now is one of the best priority for Ukraine, of course.
And of course there are attacks every day still today, and
maybe not so successful as before.
But still, I mean, the energy infrastructure is under attack, which brings me, of course, to a question to the State Secretary. Is it not a bit questionable not to focus on immediate humanitarian aid, but already talking and investing a lot in reconstruction when there are still attacks, when the war is going on and the future is completely in limbo?
Well, I think what is important to know is that Ukraine is actually in the driver's seat. Ukraine tells the partner countries such as Switzerland what they think, what their needs are, and Ukraine tells us that having jobs is absolutely key. And that's why they've been telling us for 2 years, we need private sector investment, we need jobs, because you know, the country is at war, but you still have to feed people, people need to earn a living, and the government of Ukraine actually needs to be able to tax, because they get, of course, a lot of support for certain things, but to pay the salaries of the soldiers, for example, they need to have income, and that's why if the economy collapses, I think that would be devastating, and that's why private sector investment, even now, is absolutely crucial. Now you saw that the pilot project we did is windows. Well, we can't have people living in the circumstance they're living without windows just because the war is not over. Of course, there's certain risks involved when you install the windows. I really do hope that these windows will last until we have peace, but it's not an option to just say, well, we stand back and we wait until everything is safe. So that's really not an option. And as I said, I think we really have to listen to what the Ukrainians tell us, and they tell us, come now, we need you now.
Now, Mr. Trump is saying all the time that he's a deal maker and he has made deal all his life, and you are the director of a business association and you want to help Ukraine, but in the end, isn't it all about business for you too? Is it about making money?
Well, first of all, I think I know that for certain people, the involvement of the private sector has raised some concern. And let me start with one phrase that Swiss industry never wants and never wanted, in whatever way, subsidies. And what one could consider that this type of private sector program and involvement could be considered by certain to be a subsidy, which is totally wrong. We see that there is a win-win-win situation. And the first one is what Federal Councillor Gassis has already mentioned. We enter a phase where development aid is more scrutinized. Look at what the UK Prime Minister yesterday decided. And in that perspective, you need the inclusion of the private sector, because this allows to show to the Swiss taxpayer how we can help Ukraine. Now, the second thing is how we indeed can help Ukraine. Let me just use one example. Ambassador Gerber mentioned that it is key to get Ukrainian companies back into the global supply chain, into global markets. Absolutely correct. For that, some of these companies need top-notch machinery. These top-notch machineries might be more expensive than Chinese machinery, because if you look at total cost of ownership, they are cheaper, but upfront they are more expensive because they are more sustainable, they are more circular, more sustainable, less energy consuming machinery, and hence all the things we want. That means we transfer knowledge to Ukraine and help these companies to enter the global market. And the third thing is, and that is something for Switzerland which is important, and I was grateful that it's also in the movie. It's a fight about the hearts and minds of the Ukrainians. Think about money being spent, and I'm a little bit cruel here, but think about money being spent through international development agencies or development banks, where certain countries which are more influential than Switzerland install their consultants in order then to have their companies getting the contracts. This will lead that perhaps a Chinese company, an American company, or a European company with Swiss taxpayers' money will be able to sell machinery or whatever to Ukraine. That might be okay, but what I take issue with is we want to show the Ukrainians that it is really Swiss money which helps Ukraine, because it's a fight about hearts and minds, and if we can sell Swiss machinery, if we can have joint ventures, if we can sell Swiss trains, and if we can make the life better in Ukraine, then we together, in joining between the two countries and the private sector, we can make the life better of a war-torn country.
It's about hearts and minds, and we will talk about the measures a bit more in detail. But first of all, we have to talk about one more domestic politics question, because this whole package we are talking about, this 500 million for 2025-28, there is one important question still open, still in limbo. Will it be based on a Swiss law, or will it be based on a treaty? There has been some media coverage on that. Can you maybe say where we are and what is your hope as the representative of the Swiss government?
It's a complex topic. Let me start by saying that. So first of all, SECO, of course, has done private sector engagement always, and we do have a legal basis for that. So if the pilot project that you have seen, that can be realized on current legal basis. So for that, we don't need anything. What we will always need is actually to capture the opinion of the Ukrainian, and for that we usually do project contracts and project agreements. But let's say that we can do. But the fact that we're favoring Swiss companies, so that we're doing this with the Swiss private sector and not with the Chinese or with the Icelandic private sector, that's a WTO issue. It's actually not a cooperation issue. It's a fact that Switzerland, you know, we always are trying to do things 100% or sometimes 110%, and we decided that calls for a project proposal under the cooperation are under the umbrella of WTO law. And that's why now we're not doing this. We're not, you know, calling out to the world, please join us on this private sector program. It's just designed for Swiss companies, and that's why we need to fix the procurement thing. And we can do it two ways. You can always do it with a law. The Federal Council very clearly has said that he would prefer to be a government-to-government agreement, and that's the position of the federal government. And I think it's a bit a fact of symbolism. I think if I say Ukraine is in the driver's seat, I think that's the correct way to do it. If we have to tell our Ukrainian colleagues, hold on, we first have to ask our parliament to draft a law I don't know, for me that has a different taste to it, and I think that's why the Federal Council wants to go ahead with a government-to-government agreement, but in the end, you know, we're a democracy, Parliament has the last word, and we'll do, of course, what Parliament tells us to do.
And if the Parliament is not deciding in the sense of the Swiss government and what the State Secretary just explained, that would mean basically it will take a lot of time, and one can ask the question if all this makes sense.
No, but really important, we can already work now. There is one aspect of this private sector project which we would like to include. Now you saw the conditions Ambassador Gerber explained. You have to have a unity in Ukraine, a legal unity. This is how we made it work. What cannot happen currently if Ukraine wants to order something from Switzerland, so this ordering purely out of Switzerland, that cannot happen. That would be a pity, because again, they are in the driver's seat, they should tell us what they need, but it's not that we have to stop the entire project.
Mr. Brubacher, but let's move on, and we have seen these 6 different measures that are in this 500 million package. From your point of view, what is the most useful measure that you can use and that you think will be useful for helping also Ukraine with your business activities?
It's all of them, because it's a value-added chain. So if you have, if you develop a project with initial studies, feasibility studies, then of course you help also to make it, or you up to a certain extent, you help shape how the project could look like. And let's be clear about that. We don't have to, we can talk straightforward about that. Feasibility studies very often predetermine which type of technology you are using, for example, in transportation, in energy, etc. And of course, that is one part which afterwards might help Swiss technology as well. Secondly, project finance is of course important. The CHIP approach is key because it brings the small and medium-sized companies of Switzerland together, and that is one of the key hurdles our companies face. We are niche players, and if we are better teamed up, that is very helpful. De-risking is key as long as the war goes on, and more finance security through the export finance insurance is of course key as well. So I would argue it's, as so often, it's not one single measure which is key, it's the whole package. And I would conclude with one sentence on the international agreement versus the law. We feel that we have now a window of opportunity. The goal of the Swiss government is to bring jobs to Ukraine, and we know how important jobs are. But in order to have Swiss companies set up shop and manufacturing sites in Ukraine and really increase jobs, this takes a certain amount of time. This takes a certain legal security which Swiss companies with our business culture need, and hence moving swiftly really is the best way to guarantee that the Swiss government's and the private sector's shared goal is met with regard to jobs. And I give you only one figure. Swiss tech industry has in Switzerland 330,000 employees. We have globally 560,000 employees, and hence we have proven the case that we indeed can invest globally and create jobs.
Mr. Zdenko, we've heard in the speech of Mr. Gerber, also in the video, we saw a few concrete examples, and because our discussion so far is quite general and abstract, can you maybe, because you mentioned energy sector, can you maybe give us 1 or 2 ideas? What would be projects, engagements that you think could be really good for Ukraine, and also in the context of these new measures that are quite unique and tailor-made for Ukraine?
Very good question.
Because there you will be able to do proposals, and I'm sure you have something in your head already.
I have no Swiss company with office in Ukraine. That's why I cannot jump
in your association.
Yes. So in general, I believe to speak right now about concrete project, it's a little bit too early, because right now this work is going on, and so in future this facility, project preparation office, this is the main work for them to define where and what should be done in Ukraine. But of course, as we started already with energy, it should be some energy restoring or energy power plant. For example, Zhytomyr was perfect example. Why not just to copy-paste this? It's very easy to do, and I believe as more Ukrainian city has such kind of power plants, it's better for Ukraine. Then we can, of course, if we're talking about the working places, and here is absolutely agreed with my colleagues, panel colleagues, yes, so we should think how we can open the window for Ukraine products, final products in global, because right now it's not so. So we are mostly export, raw material export country still. So we need this added value. And here becomes the problem, because really now we Ukrainians, business, we can think only short term, because we don't know what will happen tomorrow. And if I will, as a businessman, if I should choose to invest right now to buy expensive, for example, from my sphere, Bühler photo separator, yes, Bühler, or to buy Chinese from China, which is 5 times cheaper. Of course, I will choose right now Chinese, because if nobody will help me and to give me opportunity, to buy a perfect Bühler machine, which will work next 20, 30 years, which will help me to produce much better quality grain for export or final product, if I am final producing, for example, some food in private label. Yes. And this is the question. And we already saw this together with Swissmem. If there is no support for Ukrainian companies, we just not able right now to buy expensive but very useful and perfect machines from Switzerland or equipment. Without you, we will be not able to do this. Sorry. It's our country already 3 years struggling. And if you're talking about small and medium enterprise, who should generate the most of the working place in normal economy, like in Switzerland, yes? This company have no financial reserve after 3 years to think about 20, 30 years period when this top equipment from Switzerland have to bring a lot of profit back. This is.
Mrs. Budlik, we heard it's very difficult to plan in an economy, in a country, in a society where you don't know what the future is and where attacks can be there every day. What do you see as the key limitations of this private sector engagement of Switzerland in favor of Ukraine? Where are the biggest challenges and problems?
Yeah, I think I want to, if I may, just add on to what you're saying. So, of course, it's a country at war. And, of course, you need support. And this is exactly what this program is looking at. You have Swiss companies which are interested because Ukraine will have massive need. So everybody understands that there is need. And where there is need, there is a market. But then when you speak to Swiss companies, of course, the first thing they say, well, a little bit reluctant. There is still war there. So of course, I'm interested, but I need some sort of de-risking. Now, when there is a war situation, it's very difficult to get a war insurance. It's also something that we're looking at together with EBRD. But you can de-risk differently. And this is what we're trying to do with this program. If the Swiss government can fund a first order, then that's a form of de-risking. That's an enticement, and it's not a subsidy. It's sort of a down payment for a company to assume the risk. But of course, it's voluntary. We made a call for proposal, so we will not force any company. It's not our way. Our way is bottom up. The companies show an interest, and we help them to get into this market. Now, usually, how would we help? With good framework conditions, with maybe having a free trade agreement, with doing economic missions. Here, we realized very quickly we have to do something else, and it needs a bit of money. So that's, I think, how we can help to create this pathway into Ukraine. I think one of the challenges, my apologies, but I think I have to mention it, it's not an easy place to operate. And it's not only because of security concerns. I think there is a fair amount of corruption as well. And companies might be sort of scared, going into a country with war, and with what we hear, a fair amount of corruption. So being under the leadership of the Swiss government, who is not, we're not doing private sector business, but again, it's a pathway. We're trying to get companies into what is a complex market, and I think these are some of the challenges. And I think a third one is to truly understand what are the needs and what is doable and what makes sense, where is the good cost benefit. But I have to, sort of also signal that the Ukrainians are very well organized. They know exactly what they want. The ambassador is here in the room. She comes and sees me all the time. I do not perceive her as being lost in space. She also knows the Swiss companies very well, so she will exactly tell me where their interest is. And under the leadership of Ambassador Gerber, we also had an opportunity in Davos at the WEF to do a roundtable with the Minister of Economy. And again, we didn't feel that they don't know what they need. It was very clear. It was transport, energy, and education. So I think there is a clear understanding of what the job is. We're a bottom-up country, so we need to entice the private sector to go in, and that's why we created this program. And as he said, very exceptionally, there is money, but because it's a reconstruction and it's war. But of course, we're also trying to create this pathway into the market. Because one thing I think is clear, the Swiss government at one point, we have now 5 billion, it's a massive amount of money, 12 years. But the most sustainable way to create a future for Ukrainians, as you said it, is jobs. And this is done by the private sector. You will not go in for 12 years into the market. You will go in to conquer the market, and you will stay. And we have to get you in there in a complex situation with security issues and so forth.
May I?
Yes? I hope you agree with me.
Everything, I'm sure.
Not at all.
Oh.
Sorry. If you're talking about corruption.
Okay.
I want that we, there is always some picture of different countries which we have in mind. Mm-hmm. And it's very pity that for the first 20, 25 years of our independence, we have this image, corruption. Yes, it was so. But I always ask people who is right now speaking about corruption in Ukraine for foreign companies, give me the example, okay? Which I know right now, if I cannot imagine situation that some Swiss company coming with some project which supported by the Swiss government in Ukraine, and then some person in Ukraine start to demand some money because if you're talking about this classical picture of corruption, for some papers, I just cannot imagine. I never heard this in the last 3 years. So I think it will be very useful if we avoid and we retranslate to Swiss private sector also the experience of current Swiss company, how they operate. And if, for example, Geberit will say, yes, we have a huge problem with corruption in Ukraine, they always asking some money for every paper, then I will say you, sorry, I was incorrect. But I think to involve Swiss companies in Ukraine, Swiss private sector, to help us, we need to show a little bit another picture. What is the reality? If you have a good provider of the service, if you have membership in local or in Swiss or Ukrainian associations, you have a pretty good advocacy. And you also can always speak with Swiss embassy in Kiev. They are perfect in this job, as far as I know. So,
but I feel we said a bit the same, no? I said
only one point. Everything else is perfect.
I just have to say, I was in Kiev a few weeks ago, and every ordinary Ukrainian
already.
I asked on the street or in interviews or in a bar where we were filming for a report, what is problem number one of Ukraine? Everyone says corruption. That's what Ukrainians told me. So
have you asked what does it mean?
No, I haven't.
And this is the problem, because corruption, we have low-level corruption, middle-level, and high-level corruption.
So,
yeah, I mean, in the world.
yes.
I mean, sorry. And if the citizens of Ukraine need to pay to the doctor in local clinic just to get some services without the line, this is low-level corruption, but it's have nothing to do with business, small and medium enterprises.
So before we come to the Q&A session, one word for you, and also, of course, the question. I mean, your companies, when they go into Ukraine, they have a lot of problems: security, safety, bureaucracy, corruption, you name it. How to tackle that?
I think perhaps I would, in just that area which has just been discussed, I would take a middle ground, which hopefully satisfies both. Because our companies...
And shortly, please.
Our companies absolutely want to fulfill legal requirements, no corruption at all. We have Swiss laws, they implement Swiss laws. Now, if we can go under the umbrella and accompanied by the Swiss in a program to Ukraine, which has a perception, and that is Dimitro's point, which might not be correct, then all the better, because our companies will be positively surprised or confirmed in Dimitro's language, but it takes away the fear of some of our small and medium-sized companies which are legally or which are always bound to the law.
Great. So now I really I'd like to go to your questions, and we have some questions that are shown on the screen. And there are two questions, I think they're like linked. From Jörg Müller, wouldn't it be more sustainable to support the Ukrainian private sector or whoever delivers the best quality at the best price? The question is about tied aid, because one of the measures, of course, in a way, is tied aid. You have to buy Swiss products, and I know that also in science, that's not the best way to move forward. And there is Mr. Müller who is asking, why are you doing this? Like, yes, please.
Yes. So I fully embrace the idea that we shouldn't do tied aid in, I would say, classical traditional cooperation. That's a thing of the past. We're here in a reconstruction situation, and the idea is not to favor Swiss companies. The idea is to create jobs in Ukraine under a very complex market situation with war, with uncertainties, with safety concerns. So we want to bring the Swiss companies to Ukraine. It's a particular situation where it's a reconstruction situation. There is a sense of urgency. We're not trying to rewrite the whole international cooperation and go back to tied aid. It's a particular response for a particular situation. And if we wouldn't do it, I would argue that you wouldn't be so ready to go into Ukraine just now. And so that's the thing. How do we? Because in the area of cooperation, I hear a lot of we should mobilize private sector, we should mobilize private sector funding, we should do this. It's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do. But here we felt it was so important that Ukrainians had jobs, and not only jobs. In order to qualify for this program, you need to, for example, train people. So the apprenticeship model will go to Ukraine with our companies. You need to ensure that you bring quality expertise, quality products, so there will be some transfer of know-how. It's not just, okay, let me give you a check, you go, you are very happy with all. No, there will be obligations to it, and otherwise it will be very difficult to mobilize private sector. That's the only thing. So no tied aid, and it won't be the thing that we do everywhere.
There is another question, anonymous, so we don't know who is asking it, but it's also a critical question going a bit in the same direction, the last one here, on winning hearts. What makes you believe Ukrainians prefer that you finance Swiss companies rather than Ukrainian companies? I don't know to whom this question goes, but maybe to Mr. Bruppacher.
Okay, so if we understand that, for example, Ukraine wants to become a member of the European Union, that we want to have Ukraine being part of the global supply chain or the global market, then Ukraine or Ukrainian companies need newest technology, especially in areas where Ukraine asks agriculture, for example, to process raw materials in agriculture. There you have Bühler, you have Bucher, you have many of the Swiss companies which are global leaders. Manufacturing in general, that's absolutely the same thing. And if we have Swiss companies providing machinery, training, including training with apprenticeship systems or other training systems, Ukrainians on these machines, you increase competitiveness of Ukrainian companies, and hence I would argue that Ukrainians benefit very much. And of course, in the end, if Swiss companies set up manufacturing sites in Ukraine, that is even all the better. And as I mentioned before, the Swiss companies have proven that they are willing to do so. But we need, as you said, we need in this particular period the Swiss government helping us to bring the companies to Ukraine.
I want to maybe clarify two things. We're not there to compete with Ukrainian companies. And how do we assure this? We're asking the Ukrainians, what do you need? And the Ukrainians know their economy. So most likely in this call for project, we won't have any agricultural project that we will consider, because Ukrainian is actually a superpower when it comes to agriculture. But they have some things, as you said, we're also trying to build back better Ukraine, because they still have some old infrastructure from their past. So the Ukrainians will tell us, and they will not pick something where they feel that they're already very strong. That's A. B, it's 1.5 billion for the next 4 years. 500 million are for private sector, is 1 billion. We share this 1 billion with STC, and our colleagues will do the Ukrainian private sector mobilization that we always do wherever we go. That's still part of the program. So this is just because of that particular situation, a 500 million add-on.
Ms. Wenke, you want to add something?
So because you want to win our hearts, I'm somehow the person with Ukrainian hearts. In this question, I completely agreed with Swiss approach, how you see the logic of this support. And I can tell why, my opinion. Because we want more money, Ukraine, from Switzerland. And this is always money of Swiss taxpayers. And if you will be not able to explain your taxpayers, members of Swiss MEM, for example, why we just sending the money somewhere and it's not create, in the end, you, the taxpayer, are businessmen, and they want also to be involved. The logic...
that's not been our not engine yours. Behind.
Not
engine
yours, but I'm talking about the private sector.
Him, maybe.
Yes.
Not the government.
But but stop. Stop. But in the end, the taxpayers are making the rules.
No, but the engine behind the thinking behind is Swiss government cannot, or any government in this world cannot solve the situation of Ukraine alone.
Of course.
We need private sector. We've been speaking to private sector. Why are you not going to Ukraine? Why are you not doing more in Ukraine? There is war. And when we said, well, but if we could de-risk somehow, and I've spoken personally to some of your members, and they said, well, if you place a first order, of course, that's an incentive. Then I will have a closer look at the market. If I can go under your guidance and under your leadership, as you mentioned, that will, de-risk whatever I might face in this market. So that's been really the thinking. And we're not exporting Swiss people to Ukraine. We're exporting technology, know-how, the apprenticeship model. We really want to create jobs for Ukrainians in Ukraine, and potentially, and this is a last link I want to do, of Ukrainians which are currently under refuge here in Switzerland who wish to go back. And isn't it much easier to go back with maybe some training and a job waiting for you on the other side? That's, I think, something also we're trying to connect more and more with whoever has a wish to return.
We are coming to the end of this panel discussion. Federal Councillor Gassis, our foreign minister, said we have to have a controversial discussion, and we had it. So we always follow the instructions of our government. Thank you very much. Let me just very briefly wrap up. We discussed how to allocate these 500 million Swiss francs. We discussed the domestic issues that we have to settle before. You said it's not concerning all of it, but it's an important question. The questions, of course, of the feasibility. Mr. Brubacher made some strong statements in favor of private sector involvement, and you, Mr. Sidenko, you said we have not only to talk about corruption, but about the opportunities, and they made a strong statement in favor of investing and trading with Ukraine and believing in Ukraine's future. I'm very happy, I'm very delighted that you were my guests on the panel. I'm very happy for the audience having asked so many questions. Of course, we would have been able to continue for another hour. There are a lot of interesting questions, but the time is at the end. I thank you very much. Good continuation, and I give the floor again to our moderators. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian, for leading such an important conversation. Thank you to all of you. Effectivement, quelque chose a changé, donc on verra, Monsieur le Conseiller fédéral, les dernières discussions, quelque chose a changé depuis que vous avez parlé de ne pas être tout le temps d'accord, mais c'est très bien d'avoir ces discussions si importantes.